Welcome to the Know Your Legacy podcast. I'm your host, Vipul Basania, and today's guest is Sahara Rose. Sahara is the best-selling author of the book, The Idiots Guide to Ayurveda. She also runs her own blog, Eat Feel Fresh, and is the host of the Highest Self podcast, which covers everything spirituality. She's also been called the leading voice of the millennial generation by Deepak Chopra. And it's fair to say she's truly on her way to making the world a happier and healthier place because she's making ancient wisdom more accessible to the modern generation. So Sahara, it's a pleasure having you on today.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction.
No problem at all. You definitely deserve it for how far you've come.
Thank you.
I'm interested in one of the things you said recently, actually, in one of your podcasts. You said you couldn't believe some of the stuff that you'd manifested for yourself. So I was curious to know, could you dig a bit deeper into that? What are some of the things that were going on in your mind when you were saying that?
That I couldn't believe what kind of things I've manifested.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so for people who don't know, what Ayurveda is and stuff like that. So Ayurveda is the world's oldest health system. It's something that's the sister science of yoga, but isn't even popular in India these days, let alone in the United States. So when I first wanted to start studying it, it was something that no one was even talking about. It's like, oh, I want to go study some random ancient like Greek mythology topic. It's like, what? Why would you want to spend your time doing that? And I was like on track to go to law school and like do all of these things. And suddenly I was like pulled into this direction because of my own health problems, and Ayurveda is what helped me. So I wanted to study it. And then as I began healing myself and studying it, I just naturally, wanted to share it with other people. But it wasn't a profitable or popular or even a path that I had seen anyone tread before, because there are, of course, Ayurvedic doctors, but they're older Indian men. And even in India, it's something, again, that's not really practiced. So I got a lot of, backlash, of course, from my parents and from just like people around me who just thought I was like crazy. And I remember telling them, I'm like, I want to be a spiritual teacher. I want to be an Ayurveda author. I want to make Ayurveda accessible for people. And they just couldn't see that happening because it hadn't happened for anyone else before. So when I say I can't believe the things I manifested were, I actually did that. And I actually now have written 3 books about Ayurveda and am, manifested meeting Deepak Chopra, which is like a crazy story in itself, and all of these things just happening and falling into place. And I really believe that when you are in alignment with what that thing is that you are meant to be doing, which in Sanskrit is called your dharma, your role in society, then things start falling in place. It doesn't mean you can like law of attraction it and sit back and everything's going to happen for you. But when something is moving really easily, you go to that networking event, you meet all the right people you were meant to meet, and then that leads you to something else, and you're like, whoa, I'm here, and that all happened because of this. That's when you know you're on the right path.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that actually, because so many people talk about their passion or their purpose, and they're just like, oh, what do I do? And one of the guests that I had on previously, he said that it's, the way you can realize that is if you keep going back to that thing. So is that what you found with Ayurveda and that whole area of knowledge?
I think that we have different passions at different points in our time. And, I think I think of them as like soul contracts. Like I had a soul contract with Ayurveda. There was, for some reason, I needed to bring Ayurveda out there. But now this soul contract, I healed myself, I spread it, and now it's a new thing that I'm doing, So it's not like some people have this one thing that they do their whole lives, but I feel like really like entrepreneurial and creative people, they have different things at different times. And at one point you could have been all about fitness, and then you were all about this, and then all about that. But it's the same energies and it's the same strengths you're using through. Like you might be speaking about different things. Like I just interviewed this guy who's a shaman, an ayahuasca shaman, which is a plant medicine. And I interviewed him, in his background, he was like a motivational speaker for businesses. And I was like, really what he's doing is still the same. It's just a different toolkit now. So it might look differently, but it's always going to use those strengths that you were born with.
Yeah, definitely. No, that makes sense. So, I mean, just taking it back a little bit then. So when you were in your younger years, when was it that you first realized, okay, this is what I need to do? Like what was going through your head? Like, what did you feel?
Yeah. So when I was like younger, I was overweight, I had chronic asthma, I had really bad health problems. Someone told me you're going to study nutrition, I would be like, oh no, that's like the last thing I wanted to do. But I think when you're in that situation where your physical body is like screaming at you, which was what was happening to me, I had no choice but to dive into that. I was on the road to be an international human rights lawyer, which is like that thing. And then I was in India teaching health and sanitation in the slums of Delhi. And while I was there, I got super sick and visited an Ayurvedic doctor, which ended up helping me, which is what guided me to start studying it and researching it. The point that I realized that I wanted to write a book on the subject was as I started taking Ayurveda classes, I realized how hard this is to read, how it doesn't make sense, how it's so ancient, and like no one's going to, go through this stuff. And there's so much wisdom and knowledge to it because Ayurveda is not just a health system, it's like a personality analysis, and it tells you so much. The book I'm writing right now is an Ayurvedic business book, so even like the archetypes can tell you how you are in business. Are you a Vata, creative, brainstorming person? Are you a Pitta, actionable, really goal-oriented person? Are you a Kapha, more reevaluative, supportive person? So realizing this, I was like, this is such great information, but it needs to be construed in a new lens to make it more accessible for people. So that's when I saw this like space of someone needing to do it, and I stepped up to the occasion.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that as well, and you talked about the three different archetypes in one of your podcasts and in a few of your YouTube videos as well. Can you actually tell by just meeting someone for the first time, like what area they would most likely fall into, or is that something you'd have to do like on a one-to-one session with someone?
Yeah, some people I can instantly tell from looking at them, like what they are from, like, the shape of their face and things like that. Other people, it could take a little bit more like asking questions. Tends to be, from a business perspective, people who are really like artistic and visionary. They're into like writing and brainstorming and that sort of thing. They're the Vatas. I think of that like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is very much like about the story, the identity. What made Apple successful versus like Dell, because they construed the story about it and they made it almost this like counterculture thing. So that's very Vata. People who are very Pitta, I would say, like Dave Asprey and like CrossFit. It's very like biohacking and we're going to do this. It's fiery. The Pitta is the fire dosha. So they like to get things done. They're very pragmatic. They're very actionable. CrossFit is like a very time oriented, bare bones workout, that's not all about the fluff. It's all about getting shit done. And that is very Pitta. Then Kapha, I would say, Oprah is very much a Kapha, all about the story and connecting with people and giving, and you get a car, everyone gets a car. Like that's Kapha energy. It's earth. It wants to give, just like the earth provides us with resources and oil and minerals. Kapha people provide people with love and attention, care. It's grandmother energy. So a company that I think of as Kapha is like Polaroid. They took this idea of a camera and they turned it into this like deeply emotional thing that when you think of a Polaroid, it's like your memories and your childhood and all, they tied the emotions onto it. So it's really interesting because as a business person, you can think, okay, what am I? And also what are my customers? Because there could be a difference. Your customers could be a different dosha than you are, and you have to speak their language.
Right, yeah. So it's understanding almost like the psychology and the nature of that person so that you can actually market and sell to them in the right way because not everyone's going to
Exactly.
respond in the same way. So
Exactly. Yes.
no, that makes sense. I was
Mm-hmm.
also listening to your story about, when you were writing the Idiot's Guide. This was
Mm-hmm.
like a few years back, and you were talking about, I think in one session, like there was one basically moment where you wrote it or you rewrote it in a day or restructured it in a day, and you talked about tapping into your female energy or
Mm-hmm.
feminine energy. So can you talk to me a little bit about what the energy actually means and how someone can actually tap into that to manifest or be creative in the way that you are?
Yes. So I was hired to write that book. So it's the official Idiot's Guide. They have Idiot's Guide to Gardening and
Yeah.
Idiot's Guide to this, that. So they wanted to make an Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. And again, the synchronicity is I had already written a book that I was trying to pitch to publishers about Ayurveda. Penguin Random House happened to ask my literary agent the day after I signed the contract with her to represent my book to find someone to write an Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. They had an author who, you have 6 months to write the book. She was 4 months in and it was too much work and she quit and they didn't have anything. So they were like, okay, what would your table of contents be if you were to write the book? You have a week. And that's when the alignment moves into action, that I was like, okay, how can I channel this? Essentially, it's channeling. So it's opening yourself up to being a vessel for the knowledge. So I just literally stood in front of my computer and was like, what is everything that could be in this book? Universe, move through me. Okay. So instead of being like, okay, well, I could do this, I could do that, I just sort of like, they call it a download. It's like one stream of consciousness. It's like when you have that aha moment, it's almost like you press download on your software and it moved through you. So I essentially downloaded a stream of consciousness without editing it, just wrote the entire table of contents. It's a 400-page book, and their table of contents is like down to the paragraph. Wrote that whole thing, sent it to them that day, and it got approved. And then they were like, okay, well, what would the first chapter be? Again, one stream of consciousness wrote that chapter, and I wrote that whole book and edited it in 2 months, because that was what the
Wow.
deadline
Yeah.
is. And obviously, if I had never studied Ayurveda before, you can't just channel something you don't know anything about, but we know a lot more than we give ourselves credit to. I mean, we are smarter than any humans have ever been in the history of time. So there's a lot of stuff that we could write books about. There are hundreds of novels that live inside each of us, but we are blocking ourselves from it. So channeling, opening yourself up to the feminine nature, which is called Shakti, is basically allowing source to flow through you. And I know people are like, what? That sounds really esoteric and weird. We've all done it. We might not call it channeling. We might not call it these things. We could just say, oh, I just had a great idea. But that great idea is coming from something greater than you, because that's why it's an aha moment.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. And you're talking about how you channeled it through you. So, like,
Mhm.
what does that look like for someone who wants to do that in their own lives? Like, what would you tell someone who is stepping into that space for the first time to try and allow themselves to feel that?
Totally. I think first your systems have to be in place to allow you to get there. So you have to have your basic needs met. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like your survival has to be good, and then your needs, then your wants, and then you can go into self-actualization. In Sanskrit, it's the chakras, your root chakra. So for everyone that looks differently. For me, that requires waking up, drinking hot water, scraping my tongue, going to like a Pilates or some sort of exercise class. And then once my body and my mind feel right to get into that state, it moves through. For other people, that could look differently. You just have to have your basic needs met, and then create that space, it's not going to happen if you're like, okay, between 1 and 2, like I better think of my genius idea, because that's like pressure. You have to just sort of let the muse come to you. And sometimes it might come to you in an inopportune time. I mean, I think of my best ideas when I'm like out on a walk or doing something that doesn't even have to do with what I'm doing, because that's when you open up that space in your mind for the idea to come through. I think so many times we're like chasing it. We're like, why can't I think of that book idea? Why? And then it's like pressure, and it's not going to come through. So maybe that's going to take going on a walk, doing cooking, I don't know, doing something else to take your mind off of it. And there are lots of books about being in the flow state. Flow state is another word for this exact same thing. So you could think of it like the science of flow. You can think of it as source channeling through you, whatever you want. It's the same thing. It's just going to look different for different people. And I know some people don't have like the luxury of like waiting for the muse to come through, or they've never even experienced anything close to that. So I would say find pockets, maybe it's you taking a long shower and just letting your mind flow. There's a difference between meditation and contemplation. And meditation is when you shut off your thoughts and you're just focusing on the breath. And that's creating the space. But contemplation is when you just let your mind go and you follow it. And for me, I find that that's where my best ideas come through. It's like when you're a kid and you're like, oh, what about this, that? And you're like, end up in this thing. I feel like we don't allow ourselves to do that anymore because we're so like, think about the task, get the task done, especially when you're in the pitta, which is very masculine, fire, entrepreneurial. So allow whatever it looks like. Maybe you're walking on the treadmill, maybe you're doing your dishes. allow space for that contemplation. And then when you think of something, get it on paper, record yourself talking about it, get it somewhere, because, they say like an idea, it's almost like spreading around to everyone, and it's going to different like people's heads, and then some people run with it, and then for other people it goes off somewhere else. So that's why it's interesting, because patents are often filed at the exact same time in totally different parts of the country, because they had that exact same idea. So it's like that's the spiritual belief of that. It's up here, like in the atmosphere, and you just have to ground it down into like reality.
Yeah, it's like almost, I don't know what the right word for it is, but it's like it's all one consciousness, and we can pull the knowledge from the same space if we access exactly what we're talking about, that energy, that source of knowledge. And it's weird that you talk about that, because I only now, reflecting back, have had the exact same experience in a slightly different area, which was talking about philosophy and life. And there was a few topics within that were very deep, and I'd not studied anything like that before in my life. This was whilst I was studying law, and it was with one of my good friends who I was living with, and we were just like, where is this stuff coming from? We're talking for 3 or 4 hours, and it sounds so correct. Like, it just felt like we were talking about the right stuff, but it's just like, no one's taught us this. Where is this coming from, honestly? And now thinking
Exactly.
back, I'm like, okay, now it makes sense.
Hmm.
So we talked about feminine energy, very creative and free flowing, and you just
Hmm.
letting yourself go. What about the masculine energy? And then can you mix the two?
Hmm. So masculine energy provides the structure. So I think of like a swimming pool. It is the foundation of the swimming pool. The feminine energy is the water in the swimming pool. If you just have water, it's going to flow everywhere and it's going to be a mess. And if you just have the structure, there's going to be no life to it. So it needs both. We all are both. There's Shiva, Shakti, yin, yang. It is a dance. It's polarity, and it exists in from Hinduism to the Greek mythology and everything. It's duality. So the masculine energy, what it looks like in every day is setting up the system, setting up the schedule. Okay, when are these things going to get done? There's a problem, here's the answer. It's very, like black and white, but we need that sometimes, because if we're all just like emotion and flow, then sometimes things never get done. So I like to think of a masculine person who's very in their masculine is like, okay, if you have a problem, let's talk about it, here's the answer. Are you over it? Good, let's keep moving. Like, it's like that lieutenant in the army. Like, they don't want to hear everything. What's the problem? Like, I feel like we all have like dads like that, because that patriarchy is like implanted in men, especially if you're Indian, So it's like very much masculine. Then the feminine, and both sides have light and shadow sides. Light meaning positives, shadows meaning negatives. So the feminine is very much like, well, how do you feel? How could this go? Here are some options. Like, how could this move through? It doesn't want to sit and like meditate. Like, masculine is like, get things done and then be in stillness. Like, a man in their masculine loves to tune out and watch TV, or be in their man cave, or listen to music and just do nothing and enjoy that experience. Someone in their feminine energy does not like to do that. Like, they're like antsy, like, oh God, so do you want to do this? Like, they can't, if I'm watching TV, I'm like, what else can I do at the same time? It's like the feminine energy can't just do that one thing, which is why meditation should look different for people in their feminine energy. It won't look like the Buddha. So feminine energy is flowing, it's moving, it's creativity, it's collaboration, it's yes and. But when it's uncontained, when it's not met with the masculine, it can turn into overanalyzing, overthinking, being over dramatic, over emotional. And, just like a lot of people have an idea and they don't end up doing it, they just talk about it. And that's what the feminine energy could look like when not balanced with the masculine. So we all have both. We just need to find that right balance for us.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So it's just about being able to access both at the right level, and make sure that we don't sort of head in one direction more so than the other. So
Exactly.
yeah, no, that makes sense. So in terms of after you wrote the book, so I think was that over a course of a year you did it, or a few months?
I wrote it in 2
2
months.
Oh, 2
Yeah.
months. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So was it published in that time as well, or was that a few
Um,
months after that?
so I wrote it, and then they do their like editing, which, they was pretty fast, and then they
Yeah.
just published it because they just needed it to get out. They had like a pub date. So I just kind of like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then while it was like that, we did some edits back and forth, and then I already wrote the proposal and pitched my next book, which is out in October. So it's like just keep moving on the next project.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So now that you've come sort of this far into your journey, what fascinates you most about where you are at the moment?
Yeah, so for me, Ayurveda started because of health, because I had health problems. Now I don't. So it's like for me, it's not interesting anymore because I don't have the problem, you know? It's like you experience what else? It's again the Maslow's hierarchy, that survivalist med. So it's like the self-actualization. So what interests me the most is how these doshas, these archetypes are related to our purpose, our dharma. And that's something that fascinates me. And it's something that they don't really talk about, but it is a part of Ayurveda, that why we were each born with those strengths, because it's the things that we need to share. And my whole life I've been someone that like I could talk to someone for a minute and tell them what their life purpose is. That's like easily come through me. But then when my book was coming out, I kept having this like download that I was like blocking of like create a program to help people find their purpose. I was like, that has nothing to do with my book. No, no, no. But it's like when that idea comes, you just have to like write. So as soon as I started even writing in my phone, all of these ideas like week 1, week 2, week 3. So I created this entire system. And then I ran it in October with 22 people. Every single one of them quit their jobs, found their purposes, and are doing it. So I was like, okay, this works. And now I'm running it again. And that's what fascinates me, just like how we're not all meant to do different things. I feel like in this day and age, it's like reach for the stars, do whatever you want. Like, but your stars are going to be different from my stars, and we all have different deck of cards we were handed with. So I think it's important because we never have the conversation. Like I could ask you, what's your favorite color? Like what movies do you like? What music do you like? You can answer. If I'm like, what's your life purpose? I
Big
don't know. No
question.
one,
Yeah.
no, but it's like, but why is that a big question? Isn't that the most fun? Shouldn't we know why we're here, at least for this moment? So and that's what philosophy and all of that stuff is all about. And that just interests me because I think, a brand, if you were to create a brand, the first thing you would do is the why. What's the brand's message? What is their story? Who are the audience? Why don't we do this with our lives? Why don't we think of our why? You know, we put so much effort and time into this brand when we are our own personal brands. We are our own stories that we are writing every day, but we don't put any thought into it. And what ends up happening is it just someone has an idea, okay, I can fit in here, I can take that job, I can fill this role, and you never end up writing your own story.
Yeah, nothing is done intentionally. It's just that's as soon as I became conscious of that in my life, and like the fact that I saw the difference between the way I wanted to live and then how other people live, and I'm like, whoa, everyone is just they're just following the next person, and the next person doesn't even know what they're doing. So it's like, stop for a minute, take some time to breathe and think, and create that space you were talking about, to actually think about, right, okay, when I'm looking back at my life, what do I want it to look like if I was
Right.
watching it on replay, will I be happy with that or not?
Mm-hmm.
And if not, then you need to do something different today. So I think that ties in with you helping others find their purpose. And it's a big question that's thrown around all the time now in the personal development space as well. So with the 22 individuals that you helped over the course of over that period of time, what was the interactions or the questions or the activities you sort of involved them in, just to help some of the listeners or watchers?
Yeah, so the first part is knowing what your dosha, your Ayurvedic dosha is. Are you Vata, the wind, the creative type? Are you Pitta, the actionable type? Are you Kapha, the personable type? Knowing that is going to already like eliminate you know, 90% of the things you should not be doing. So if you are super Vata, you're really creative. That's what my type is. You need to be doing something that's like really allows you freedom and you can keep on growing and moving, which is why the online space could be good. Maybe you want to be an artist, maybe you want to be work in an ad agency, something like that. You need to be using your creative powers, otherwise you're going to feel totally blocked and totally unhappy. So if I, per se, let's say I became that lawyer, I would for sure not be happy because I wouldn't be able to, being a lawyer is not using your creativity, maybe in like ways to get by the law, but it's not like a creative job. It's like, these are the rules. Can you follow them and maybe find a little bit out of them? So that wouldn't be me living up to my dharma, and it's going to show up in health problems. So when you're not following that dharma, your body talks to you, which sounds crazy, but every health problem has an emotional cause. So if you're experiencing the vata problems, there's something going on there. So I was experiencing them because I wasn't being creative. I was just, following the path, looking around and doing what needed to be done next. So I was experiencing the vata problems, which are related to being dry and cold. So for example, in the digestion, bloating, gas, constipation, cracking joints, anxiety, insomnia, hormonal imbalance, later on Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, all of that is related to vata. Now, people who are really pitta, they're like the ones who, like, you want to hang out in 2 months, they're going to send you like a Google Cal and be like 2:15 to 3:15, we're going to hang out and like follow up. Like I think you have some pitta in you. But they're really organized and they're structured, and they have like a purpose to what they're doing. And men tend to be more pitta because it is a more masculine quality. So for them, they're like, here's the plan, Q1 goals, Q2 goals, like, are we going to do it? But what ends up happening is life doesn't always go that way. And when it doesn't, they get frustrated and angry and like, I was supposed to control everything and it's not working. So they get mad, and that fire, which was making them really goal oriented, can turn into a volcano and make them angry and like scary for everyone else around them. So I think of like the super, super shadow side is Donald Trump. He's someone with a very bad pitta imbalance because it's all about his way, get things done, I'm right, you're wrong. And you can see in his body, he has a lot of pitta. So pitta is fire. So they have redness in their skin. They have inflammation. He's super inflamed. He totally has heartburn and acidity. Like I want to send him like all the leafy greens and cilantro and coconut water because I know what he's dealing with. So, he's super just inflamed and on edge and angry, and like the littlest thing will tick him off. And that's what pitta can look like when it's like super out of balance. But when it's in balance, you could think of a Tim Ferriss, who's like, he's organized and structured and get things done, but he's also has space for play and creativity and that sort of thing. So you could be Tim Ferriss, you could be Donald Trump. Choose your side. And then kapha, if you are a kapha, that means you're really earthy, you're calm, you talk a little bit like this. Yeah. I don't know if you ever interviewed someone on your podcast that talks like this. Have you?
No,
No.
no, not yet.
You'd get
You'd be the first.
So they're really earthy. And when you are a vata or pitta, you're like, hurry up. What do you want to say? It's like, so kapha people are really like earthy and grounded and calm. And they are the people that everyone come to when they have a problem, and they'll sit and they'll listen to you and they'll make sure you're okay. And they put their friends first. So again, the Oprah energy, the grandmother energy. I think of Robin Williams as one. Robin Williams was someone who made everyone else laugh. But what happens when you give is you end up depleted. So they're the most likely to suffer from depression because they feel like they have to make everyone else around them happy. But if they share how they feel, no one's going to support them. So Robin Williams is a great example of that because he took his own life, but no one knew he was unhappy. So kapha people tend to hold on to things. They hold on to people, they hold on to memories, they hold on to emotions, and they hold on to body fat. So they tend to gain weight very easily. They tend to be more sedentary, even like they could be lazy in doing the things they need to be doing. It's like if you ever have a friend, you're like, what you're supposed to be doing, and you tell them a million times and they're not taking the advice. And they're like, oh, I don't know, this excuse, that excuse, it's not the right time, I need to wait it out a little bit longer. That's kapha right there. So kapha people will make sure everyone else around them is okay. If it's for their friend, they'll get up and do that thing. But when it comes to themselves, they can get really lazy. And kapha people, they do best in like one-on-one settings. So let's say they are like a coach working one-on-one with people, or they have a store and they're interacting with people. They're also really good at like working with their hands because they're really patient. So you'll see a lot of chefs, a lot of I don't know, jewelry makers, interior designers, things like that, because they're really like attentive to detail. Whereas like the Vata is like the big picture person who'll have the idea and like storm off and be like, you guys figure out the details. And the Pitta person's like, okay, here's the map. And then the Kapha is like, how do you feel about that? You know? So we need all three. Otherwise the world won't work. We need all three. We need the Vatas to think of the ideas. We need the Pittas to execute, and we need the Kaphas to like do the human resources, then human resources and customer service and all of that stuff. So it's finding out your dosha, figuring out your strengths, figuring out what it is you're good at, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and then what is your purpose statement. If you could explain that thing in what sentence what it is, and it basically leaves you with that, and then you can go off into the world and start living it.
Can you be a mix of those? Everything you just discussed there. Is everyone a mix of them, or yeah?
Yes. So everyone has all three in varying amounts. No one is perfectly all three. It's impossible because a lot of them contradict. But you do have all three, and you have something called, this is now getting to Ayurveda level 2. This is called your prakriti. Your prakriti is your natural born constitution. It's what you were born with. So let's say you were born primarily Pitta, secondarily Vata, lastly Kapha. Then life happens, and maybe you get in a situation where you need more fire, you get in a situation you get more water, you're raised by parents that are like this, and that changes, and that's called your Vikriti. So your Vikriti is the doshic state you have now, and your Prakriti is what you were born with. Your Prakriti never changes. It's like your fingerprint. It's in your DNA. It's just who you are. Like, it's like you see kids, they have different personalities. That's just in them, you know? Some are super creative, some are super like they want to play house all the time, some are playing sports. You can see their doshas right there. But then life, you know, you might grow up in a society that being really Pitta, like in America, being really Pitta is something revered. So we all try to be more Pitta. But let's say we lived in Japan, and being really calm and peaceful is what's the best. So maybe we'll all try to be more Kapha. So that changes it. But what you're naturally good at is going back to your Prakriti.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So we all have one area that we always come back to because that's our natural state almost.
Exactly. And again, it can be a combination of two. So let's say you're a Vata Pitta. So you are creative, but you also can take action. So then for you, like, you know, like I have a lot of Vata and Pitta. I have the idea, but then I actually get it done. Let's say you're more Pitta Kapha. So you take action, but you care a lot about people. So maybe you should work in like, you know, politics or something. You care about the people and you're taking action. Let's say you're Vata Kapha, so you're creative, but then really with attentive to people. So maybe, yeah, coaching would be something really good for you. So you can find like parallels of all of them.
Yeah, so basically understanding who you are first and then playing to your strengths. So
Exactly.
that makes sense. So let's take it all the way back. Let's rewind it back to when you were in school. What were you like as a person then? And when did you start becoming more consciously aware of like, okay, I need to know what I want to do in life, and this doesn't seem like it, so I'm going to go in this direction?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I was like, when I was born, I didn't cry. I was like very like attentive to detail. Like it's called an old soul. Like I've been on this plane before. So when I was a kid, I was just like always like, yeah, I'm gonna join the Peace Corps and like become a monk, and like was always into this kind of stuff. But then, you know, society can make you forget. So really when I like remembered again, I would say is when I was like around 12 years old and I was overweight and I wanted to lose weight. So because of that, I started to go to hot yoga because I heard hot yoga can help you lose weight. And then from doing the hot yoga, connecting with my body, I started to wonder more, what's yoga? What's the purpose? Started reading books, Deepak Chopra, this, that. And then by the time I was 15, I started traveling. I convinced my mom to let me go to a prison and live next to a prison in Costa Rica. And I was like taking care of the kids there. And I started, you know, doing a lot of NGO work and traveling. So I think it's like, you know, it wasn't like a 1 point moment. Just the more I got exposed to different cultures and the way that they lived and how different it was from the way that I lived, I started to look at things again from a more outside perspective and then questioning my beliefs. And I continued to do this, you know, like things that even I was taught from my parents. Does this make sense? Or are they just saying this because that's what they were told, or it's coming from fear? Or where is it coming from? Probably the biggest point of my growth was after I graduated from college. I was living in India. I had already started doing this Ayurveda stuff, but it wasn't profitable. It wasn't making money. And I was like, still figuring it out. And that's where my parents were like, okay, like you need to get like a 9 to 5 job. They're like, all the other kids have these jobs and you don't. And, you know, it's like that guilt and shame and knowing. So, and then like sometimes I would try because I want to make them happy, but knowing that it wouldn't work for me. And then that was like this point of like, do my parents know best or not? And then realizing and having compassion for your parents want you to be safe. They want you to be okay. And for them, what they believe is safe is for you to do what is known. They don't want you to go off into the unknown and potentially not make it because they've seen a lot of other people try to make it and not. But the thing is, if you have resilience, there's no chance you will fail. But your parents don't know that. They want you to be safe, which is not necessarily your highest self. So I had to literally like hear from my parents, like, you're a failure, you're a loser, we are so disappointed in you, we're ashamed of you. I had to hear all of those things to literally have the bonds of their approval broken, of like, okay, they already think I'm a loser and failure, so I don't give a shit anymore. I'm just going to live life on my own terms, and I'm not doing it for their approval or for anyone else. I'm just doing it for me. And then I left to Bali, and I just started to do my own thing, and then building my way, questioning the beliefs and making it super true to me. And now my parents like love what I'm doing. They're like showing everyone my book. They're like, yeah, she wrote this. They're like, why don't you write about us in the acknowledgements? I'm like, uh but it's funny, and it's just a testament that like you have to be so sure of yourself and so believing in yourself that other people will believe in you. If there is an ounce of quivering in your truth, other people can feel that, and if they care about you, they will try to shake that up. So even if you don't know, I say sometimes go on an advice detox. Don't ask your parents for advice or anyone who you think might be questioning you until you're sure about what you want to be doing, because their questioning you could take you off rail. And if you want to have a loving relationship with your parents or anyone else, you need to be true to yourself, because what ends up happening if you don't, and this happens all the time, is like you're on your parents' deathbed and you're like, oh my God, I never got to live my own life. And you have resentment towards them. And what a horrible way to live. If you want to truly love your parents, you have to be yourself, because then there's no resentment there.
this like I was really silent now, biting my tongue, because this snippet right here, like the last 5 minutes of you talking, is exactly what I've been saying to everyone and feeling myself as well over the last few years. It's just me coming to my own realization. And I think you can only feel and experience that just like you have if you're on that path and you're actually walking it and talking it and living that. What were some of the beliefs that you questioned or had to reevaluate?
Oh, so many. I mean, my parents were immigrants to this country. So for them, survival is the most important thing. So you just choose the job that makes the most money, right? It's like that was all they saw. How much money does it make? Are you going to make money? Money, 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 money. That's it. And I was like, so then I went on this extreme of like, money doesn't matter. I don't like money, that. And then I realized like, okay, for me to make an impact, for me to hire assistants, for me to do anything, I need money. So reframing my relationship with money was a really big thing, seeing money as a tool, as a form of energy that can make whatever I am more expanded. It's just a microscope of what you are. So the belief that money is the root of all evil, or more money, more problems, that person already had problems. The money, the Real Housewives, if they were broke, they're still the freaking Real Housewives. They need to work through shit. So questioning that belief. Another one was like with relationships. My parents were always like, or just taught to me, especially my cousin came from Iran, it was like, if you like a guy, ignore him as much as possible, look the other way, pretend you don't care about them, like the more you ignore them, the more they'll like you. So I had that in my head, and like, what a way, so obviously I'm going to attract the people who just see it as a game. And then why does it make sense, if you're interested in like someone, to like make sure you never make eye contact with them so they follow and chase you? That doesn't make any sense at all. So reshaping that relationship, like just so many of these like limiting beliefs of like, if you want to do something, like analyze the other people who've done it and just follow whatever it is they say. It's like there was no true belief of like they say, oh, do whatever you want, but it's like when you actually start doing whatever you want, they're like, wait, you weren't supposed to listen.
Yeah.
You're just supposed to have a quote and a sticker that said that. No, don't listen.
Yeah.
And then like realizing, I'm like, wait, then why the hell did you like educate me and do all these things if you just want me to like go, be a housewife or work at a makeup store or whatever it is. So all of that, and seeing your parents as humans, is not the people who know the answers, and also not the enemies either. Just having this like human to human relationship with them, and just, and I think it's like in other cultures they have rites of passages and initiations of like from child to adult, and we don't really have that in Western society. So it's this like really weird line of like, you go to college but you're still talking to them, you're still getting advice for them, like when do you become your own person? And some people have parents who are like totally supportive, you do your thing, don't worry about it, and that's great for you. But other people, especially if you come from an immigrant family, that's, survival is the thing that matters most, not enlightenment.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. And one thing that I realized as well over the course of the last few years is just like everyone is going through that particular circumstance for the first time. So just because your parents are your parents doesn't mean they have all the answers. They're looking after a child, for example, let's say you, who's trying to do their own thing in life and rebelling, which wasn't part of their plan. And they're going through this circumstance for the first time. So they don't know how to react because they're thinking, who do I
They
get
don't even know what iPhones are. They don't even know how to work the internet. They're like make money on Instagram. What? It's like, no, there's never been an internet before. Like before it was like, maybe you want to take a different job. At this point, like the fact that we can create a job out of anything is out of their reality, truly, that they can't really grasp on it. But once you start doing it, success is the best way to prove yourself. Once they see you're doing it and you're successful and you don't need them anymore, then they're going to be like, oh, look at my son, but you just have to believe in yourself enough to get to that point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So one thing before we get onto the final few questions to wrap up this conversation, what was the story behind you meeting Deepak Chopra, and how did that actually come about?
Yeah, so it's a long story. I recorded about it on my podcast like right after it happened. So it's like an hour-long story, but the gist of it was I've always been a huge Deepak fan. I've read all his books. When I was going through all my family stuff, I was always listening to his audiobooks. And when I wrote The Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, it was always like, I wish I could get a quote from Deepak Chopra, but how am I ever going to contact him? Like, it's like Oprah to me. So I really set the intention out. That's the first thing, set the intention out. And then everyone I would meet, I would be like, so like, do you know Deepak Chopra? Like sneak into the conversation, and like started like stalking all his family members and seeing how we could get connected. But again, that didn't work either. I truly believe the people you need to meet, you will find them yourself. It's not going to be through your friend. It's not going to be through anyone. You're going to find them yourself. I met a friend on Instagram, and the friend was like, oh, come to this yoga and science conference and meet up with me while you're in New York. I was like, okay. So I went, and it was this whole conference, and it was quite long. It was very scientific, and it was the lunch break. And they were like, okay, it's the lunch break, and a special note from our sponsor, Deepak Chopra. And I didn't even know he was going to be there. And he just comes on stage. He's like, hello. And he like walks off. And I just knew. I was like, this is your chance. You need to go talk to him. So I'm in an auditorium with like 1,000 people at a university. I literally walk down the auditorium, up the stairs, onto stage. And this is like, he wasn't talking. This was like when everyone was kind of moving, but I just like walk up to him, and it was like, hi, Deepak ji. Like, my name is Sahara Rose. Like, I'm a huge fan of your work. I just wrote this book called Idiots Guide to Ayurveda. You were a huge inspiration for me for writing this book, and I would love to send you the PDF of it. And he was like, okay, sure. And he gave me his email address, and I was like, oh my God, I have Deepak's email. This is the best day ever. So I sent him the email, and then my friend was like, well, what do you really want? Like, if you could have anything, what would it be? I was like, for him to write the foreword of my book. But that's something so personal, and how can you ask someone that? And she was like, just hold that intention. So I asked him, like, if you like it, can you write a quote? And he looks through it. He's like, what's your phone number? I'm like, So basically, he calls me on the phone. I felt like I was talking to like Morgan Freeman, like the voice of God, you know? And I was like, he's like, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was going back to LA. He's like, I'm going to be in San Diego. Can you come meet me in San Diego? I was like, yeah, I'm going to be in LA. Like, happened to have that happen. So the day I got back from LA, I went to San Diego and I met with him in person. And I was so scared. Like, what does he want to say to me? And after he did this, like, he talks for 4 hours at once. He did this 4 hour speech, and then we had our meeting. And then he starts asking me like all these questions, like just about my life. And then he's like, afterwards, I guess I passed. He's like, I love what you're doing. I'm gonna write the forward to your book. We're gonna collaborate. You're gonna join my team Jayo, and like all of these things. And I was like, holy shit! Like everything that I had been wishing and hoping for, I had to get myself to that state where it could have manifested. So to me, manifestation, law of attraction is not necessarily chasing after that thing, but getting yourself at that vibration to attract it. So I did take the action of going up to him and meeting him, but like also thousands of people a day go up to him and meet him. I also had to, I've written books about it. I did the work, and I also held that space that he could trust me. So I think it's like, if you want to meet someone famous, like, and you want them to endorse you, like, be that person that person would genuinely want to endorse. Don't just like, people use desperation, because now I see people do it to me. Don't use desperation. Don't use guilt. Don't make them feel bad or give them your sob story or write a novel. Make it all about what you can provide them. So I was like, hey, I'm writing this book. It's by Penguin Random House. It's going to go out to a lot of people. Like, I'd love to give you the opportunity to write the foreword of it. So for him, it's also like, cool. I'm getting in all of these books and spreading to more people. It's aligned with my message. It works for both parties. So I think you really need to show upfront value. And this is not just for a famous person. Anyone you want to work for, intern for, anything. Show upfront value. Give so much value that person naturally wants to give back to you.
Yeah, there's a lot that we can talk about on that particular topic, because it's such a big thing on social media. You get so many people saying, "Oh, can you give me a shout out? Can you come and check my profile?" And I don't even respond. I just laugh because I see past that now. Because one of the things that I had to study for one of my online businesses that I was doing a few years ago was advertising and how to write copy. And the first thing you're taught is value. Like, you need to be able to provide value for the other person. Don't talk about yourself, talk about the other person and what they can get,
Exactly.
the benefit.
Exactly.
So
And this never stops, guys. Like, I'm still, when I'm meeting people, thinking of how can I provide value into their lives. This never stops. You never get to this point that you're too cool or too special, because people have limited time. They have limited resources. And even if they say yes to you because of their sob story, it's not a hell yes. It's like a I feel bad for you yes. And you don't want someone's pity.
yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot more we can talk about, but I'll get into the final few questions now that I ask everyone. So the first one is, with everything you know now, obviously you've come a long way since you first started. If there's anything you could tell your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
18-year-old self. I'd be like, don't drink alcohol. Alcohol is just a waste of calories and just not good. And, I feel like when you're 18, you're really like, you think you know, but you don't. So I would say take any opportunity you can to get to know yourself. Go to different workshops, get outside of your friend zone, get outside of, the college bubble, interact with different people from different walks of life, and just expand your consciousness.
Yeah, I guess that's a tender age, because you feel like, you want to be accepted as well. So you're like, oh no, I'm gonna, I'm gonna do what they're doing, or I'm gonna do what these guys are doing. So
Exactly.
it's like almost an identity crisis moment, when you go through
Totally,
that time.
totally.
So,
Hmm.
so the second question is, if you could write one thing for 3 generations from now to read, so your children's children's children, and there's only one thing you could write, like a sentence or a phrase, and it goes in a time capsule for them to read and dig out years from now, what would that be?
Can I swear?
Yeah, you can.
Do whatever the fuck you want. That's what I'd write.
Yeah, definitely. That's
Yeah.
exactly the same as me, because
Yeah.
the way I see it is, like, in the end you're gonna die anyway. So, like,
Yeah.
don't waste
I'd,
your life.
I'd write YOLO. And they'd be like, what's YOLO?
So yeah, the big final question now. I mean, you're looking back at your life. You're on your deathbed, or you're in the final few moments, basically, and you're looking back. What is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
That I helped raise consciousness.
Just generally straight up the
That's
population,
it.
raise
Just
the
raise
consciousness.
consciousness. That's why we're all here. We're all here to lift the frequency of this planet. And it comes in different ways and modalities, but anything you can do to raise consciousness is the only purpose that your soul is here for.
I love that. That sounds so simple, but like I've never thought of it in that way, because that encapsulates everyone. Like
Yeah.
for you specifically, you're raising the vibration through the ancient wisdom of medicine. And then you've got, like, for example, me sharing these conversations and the stuff that I share with people in a completely different way, different area of
Mm-hmm.
knowledge as well. So no, I love that.
And you have someone raising a kid, and you have someone playing the guitar, and you have someone who's gardening, and we're all raising consciousness here.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and I've had so much fun on this episode. So I'd definitely love to
Thank
have
you
you
so
back again.
much.
So
Absolutely.
thanks for all your time and energy.
Thank you.